63 million lives that have been lost to abortion because of Roe. This is a battle for hearts and minds, and it's educating people on the humanity of the life in the womb.
Rise up for abortion rights! Rise up for abortion rights! For abortion rights, rise up! For abortion rights, rise up!
Shift in regulatory power. The United States Supreme Court recently issued 3 major decisions with significant implications for the country. These rulings will affect various aspects of regulatory power and individual rights. The first case, SEC v. Jarkissi, resulted in a 6-3 vote ruling that defendants in civil penalty cases brought by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, are entitled to a jury trial in federal court. This decision is poised to create massive ripple effects across other agencies and their ability to impose civil penalties. The ruling emphasizes the 7th Amendment's guarantee of a jury trial, potentially complicating enforcement actions by regulatory agencies. The second case, Ohio v. EPA, was decided by a 5-4 vote along ideological lines. The Supreme Court blocked the Environmental Protections Agency's EPA Good Neighbor Rule, which sought to limit ozone emissions from upwind states that affect downwind areas. This decision hampers the EPA's ability to regulate cross-state pollution effectively. The third significant case involves the inadvertent disclosure of the EMTALA case Moe v. U.S., which allowed abortion care as emergency care in hospitals in response to Idaho's total abortion ban. This ruling affirms that hospitals must provide emergency abortion services under federal law, even in states with restrictive abortion bans. These cases are part of a broader effort by right-wing groups to deconstruct the administrative state. Wealthy interests, such as the Koch brothers and Leonard Leo's network, have long targeted agencies like the SEC, CFPB, EPA, and OSHA to reduce government regulation, particularly in areas affecting health and safety. The Supreme Court's composition was strategically assembled to fulfill this deconstruction project, with many judges appointed by former President Trump sharing this agenda. In the Fifth Circuit, where the SEC v. Jarkissi case originated, judges have aggressively challenged administrative agencies' authority, often using drastic measures to undermine their regulatory power. The Supreme Court's decision in this case effectively limits the SEC's ability to prosecute securities fraud vigorously, as the agencies may lack the resources to pursue cases in federal court. Historically, the Supreme Court has allowed non-criminal trials and civil penalties to be adjudicated outside of Article III courts, as long as the United States interests were involved. However, this approach has been challenged by the right-wing legal movement seeking to dismantle the administrative state. By invoking the 7th Amendment in the SEC v. Jarkissi case, the Supreme Court's ruling represents a strategic power grab. Justice Sonia Sotomayor criticized the decision, arguing that judges should not overrule Congress and the executive branch's constitutional powers to establish regulatory systems. She contended that this ruling injects a poison pill into the system by ensuring jury trials for civil penalties, complicating regulatory enforcement. Ultimately, the Supreme Court's recent decisions reflect a broader agenda to weaken regulatory agencies and limit their authority. While the court did not adopt the most extreme measures, it subtly undermined agencies' power to regulate effectively. This nuanced approach may attract less immediate attention, but has profound long-term implications for the administrative state and its ability to protect public health and safety. EPA and abortion rights. The Supreme Court's recent decision have far-reaching implications, particularly in how federal agencies can enforce regulations and in the realm of reproductive rights. In the Ohio v. EPA case, the right-wing majority blocked the Environmental Protection Agency's EPA Good Neighbor Rule, which aimed to restrict ozone emissions from upwind states. This decision is part of a broader effort to limit the reach of federal agencies, making it harder to hold violators of regulations accountable. Interestingly, Justice Amy Coney Barrett sided with the Democratic-appointed justices in this case, underscoring her independent judicial philosophy. Despite this, the bottom line remains that polluters and security fraudsters are now less likely to face stringent accountability. The case involved nearly 24 Republican-controlled states seeking emergency relief to block the EPA's rule designed to limit downwind pollution from power plants. The Supreme Court has been criticized for its use of the shadow docket, where decisions are made without full briefing, often along party lines. This practice has been employed to block several Biden administration policies while approving those of the Trump administration. Recently, there has been a pullback from using the shadow docket, led by Justice Barrett, who expressed uneasiness with its extensive use. Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson dissented strongly, arguing that the majority was wrong to intervene at this stage and block the rule. They believe the case should have been allowed to develop further in the lower courts, given the extensive record. The Good Neighbor rule is critical for controlling pollution across state lines. Critics argue that the Supreme Court's decision effectively allows polluters to act with less oversight, contributing to a dystopian scenario where environmental regulations, arm control, and reproductive rights are all undermined. In another significant decision, the Supreme Court addressed a case from Idaho involving a conflict between federal laws requiring hospitals receiving federal funding to provide emergency abortion care and Idaho's total abortion ban. During oral arguments, Justices Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Chief Justice John Roberts attempted to find a balanced approach, suggesting that the state and federal requirements could coexist. Despite this, the court has faced criticisms for not siding with Idaho outright, especially in an election year. This decision is seen as a move towards a more balanced approach to environmental and reproductive issues. However, the anti-abortion movement suffered a setback, as 3 Republican-appointed justices could not secure a majority to uphold Idaho's stringent abortion law against federal requirements. Justice Barrett's opinion contained the controversial suggestion that Idaho could argue that the federal law, EMTALA, violates the spending clause of the Constitution. This would severely limit Congress's ability to pass progressive legislation for public health and safety. If upheld, such a ruling would force pregnant women in Idaho to seek emergency care outside the state to avoid prosecuting doctors performing health-saving abortions. These decisions reflect a broader right-wing effort to dismantle the administrative state and limit Congress's power. This trend has accelerated since the Roberts Court came to power in 2007, influenced by historical accidents and the anti-democratic nature of the Electoral College. These rulings underscore the ongoing battle over the scope of federal regulatory power and individual rights in the United States. Enforcement of the EPA. The Supreme Court has halted the enforcement of the Environmental Protection Agency's Good Neighbor rule, which restricts smokestack emissions from power plants and other industrial sources that contribute to smog-causing pollution in nearly a dozen states. The rule was put on hold while legal challenges continue, marking the conservative-led court's latest blow to federal regulations. The High Court, with a 6-3 conservative majority, has increasingly restricted the powers of federal agencies, including the EPA, in recent years. The justices have restricted the EPA's authority to fight air and water pollution, including a landmark 2022 ruling that limited its authority to regulate carbon dioxide emissions from power plants contributing to global warming. The EPA adopted the rule to protect downwind states that receive unwanted air pollution from other states. States such as Wisconsin, New York, and Connecticut struggle to meet federal standards and reduce harmful levels of ozone due to pollution from out-of-state power plants, cement kilns, and natural gas pipelines that drift across their borders. Ground-level ozone or smog forms when industrial pollutants emitted by cars, power plants, refineries, and other sources chemically react in the presence of sunlight. High ozone levels can cause respiratory problems, including asthma and chronic bronchitis, particularly for people with compromised immune systems, the elderly, and children playing outdoors. States contributing to ground-level ozone must submit plans ensuring that coal-fired power plants and other industrial sites do not significantly contribute to air pollution in other states. In cases where state has not submitted a Good Neighbor Plan or EPA disapproves a state plan, a federal plan is supposed to ensure downwind states are protected. The Supreme Court has blocked the EPA's enforcement of the Good Neighbor Plan, which aims to reduce ozone pollution in the U.S. The rule, which was brought by 11 mostly Republican-leaning states, is rooted in its authority under the Clean Air Act and is expected to postpone the benefits that the plan is already achieving in many states and communities. While the plan is on pause, Americans will continue to expose the higher levels of ground-level ozone, resulting in costly public health impacts that can be especially harmful to children and older adults. Ozone disproportionately affects people of color, families with low incomes, and other vulnerable populations. With the stay in place, the mining industry looks forward to making its case in court that the EPA rule is unlawful in its excessive overreach and must be struck down to protect American workers, energy independence, and electric grid and the consumers it serves. The EPA rule was intended to provide a national solution to the problem of ozone pollution, but challengers said it relied on the assumption that all 23 states targeted by the rule would participate. In fact, only about half that number of states were participating as of early this year. The decision hinders the EPA from protecting states such as Connecticut and New York that suffer from ozone pollution generated in the Midwest. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.